Good afternoon, everyone. Kaya and welcome. Thank you so much to you all for taking time on your weekend to join us today in this discussion about country and community. NAIDOC 2020 is coming to an end, and we've enjoyed a week of celebration for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and cultures in line with the theme always was and always will be. We are meeting today from many parts of this country, and I ask you all to join me for a moment to consider the country that you are standing on today. For me, that is the Whadjuk Noongar people of Borlu Budja or Perth, WA. I acknowledge them as the rightful custodians of this land and pay my respects to their elders and their culture. This land was never ceded, and therefore it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. This event today is brought to you by the National Community is Everything Network, which comprises of action groups from Amnesty International Australia, which are based across the various states. The network aims to respect the connection of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to their land and country, and to end the fracturing of that connection that occurs when country is destroyed, and to end the fracturing that occurs through the justice system, when Aboriginal people are disproportionately incarcerated and when children as young as 10 years old are locked up. Today, we have the pleasure of listening to Auntie June Gunlickinimal Mills, Karina Lester, Auntie Stephanie Armstrong, and Uncle Rodney Dillon as they discuss this topic of country and community. You will note that as audience members, your microphones have been muted by the host. The purpose of this is to maintain the best possible sound quality for this event, as it is being recorded, and it may be shared publicly in other forums or the radio or networks in the future. If you have any questions throughout the presentations, please feel free to write them in the chat column. At the bottom of your screens, you should see a chat icon, and if you click on that, you have the opportunity to type the words of your question, which we will focus on later. When all the speakers have been heard, we will work through as many of those questions as we can in the time frame available. Okay, I will now introduce our first speaker, Auntie June Gunlickinimal Mills. Auntie June is a well-known Darwin identity, and she is a Larrakia elder and traditional owner of the Larrakia lands, whose land includes Darwin and the surrounding area. Auntie June is best known as a singer-songwriter and Indigenous rights activist. In 2005, she recorded her debut album, I'll Be the One, and was awarded Female Musician of the Year at the Indigenous Music Awards. More recently, she became an accomplished visual artist known for her paintings and public art projects, such as her memorial to the Stolen Generation, which saw June paint 100 pieces of children's clothing to remember the stolen generation. This is just one of many examples where June's passion for activism meets with her passion for art. Auntie June, it's wonderful to have you here with us today. Over to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, my darling. And happy NAIDOC to everyone, all of us. I would like to acknowledge all of our peoples, all of our elders past and present. And I thank you all for allowing me to share this space and speak up for our people. I'm very well known as a Larrakia elder, but I also, you know, with the 4 lines of grandparents, I am also equally known as Jawan and Gurinji and a Kungarakan. My mum's Kungarakan, freshwater woman. And I can equally speak on those things as we all can. I would just like to say that I'm not just a political activist for Indigenous people, I'm for everybody and social justice right across everywhere. So I'd say I have gained a reputation for fighting for East Timor and West Papua, and most recently started doing comedy, because I like to look at all sorts of things to get our messages out, you know. But I would like to say it at the beginning of the talk, like I said, happy NAIDOC to all of us. It's a time of reflection, of acknowledgements, I would like to reiterate again, like it says, always was, always will be. We must acknowledge that this is an illegal occupation of our sacred lands. Always was, always will be. The governments, successive governments over the years have been fraudulent. They're fraudsters. They are not legit. They're illegally exploiting the lands of ours, our sacred lands, illegally using them. None of us across this land have ceded our sovereignty. We still fight for our rights, and we still fight to look after our country, which is our inherent responsibilities and our rights as well, and which we all take incredibly seriously. And we all are inspired and driven from that. And it's like a springboard off into whatever we do in our lives. I know that everything I've ever achieved or tried to do has been driven from a deep responsibility, from caring for country. When we carry our names, Ganlaki Nimol, it's not just a name given to me. It's an entrustment and an inheritance and a responsibility. Ganlaki Nimol is land which I'm responsible for. And by rights, even though I don't have access to it because it's a pastoral area, by rights, people should come to me and seek out permission and knowledge about how best for them to perform on that country, or how they behave when they're in that country. This should happen. It doesn't necessarily happen, but this is what happens when we get our names. Now, I have several names. I have Good Billing as well, which is shared by five other Larrakia ladies. I have also Malagulagi and Nimmo, and they all carry responsibilities. So I would like to say in 232 years of illegal occupation of our sacred lands, and with that comes the raping and the pillaging of anything and everything. Now, I just think that it's a time of reflection that the worldview, our worldview clashes with the worldview of the people who are illegally occupying our lands. And we struggled with this every day, right across this land. And all of us are struggling with all these battles, and it's consistent. Well, one thing I would like to say about all that is that really since from first invasion, all of our peoples across this land have been busy with the act of survival and trying to betterment for our people. I would like to acknowledge that in all this time, we have never had a chance to pull up for 5 minutes and heal ourselves nationally. I'd love to see that day when we all come together and have a day of healing, because we're all just so under the pump, and we have been, and we will continue to the future, because as the waves of populations come in every day, goodness knows how many people are landing in this land, and the waves of, they call it exploration up here in Martin, this is what I'm facing now, the very real horrors of fracking. You know, Michael Gunner here, the chief minister, said that they want to frack 55% of the territory. 55% of the property is of the territory is identified as to be fracked. Can you imagine the disaster that we are having to face? Now, water is sacred to all of us, and it's always been protected by our people, by our laws, by our custodianships, by our responsibility. It's always been a given that we have beautiful, clean water for everybody. That is not the case anymore. The water is drying up. The water is being poisoned. The water is being fractured. it's not a given anymore. And to me, this is one of the worst things leading into the future. One of my consistent worries for the future of all of our peoples, not only my grannies. I say to people, you know, I don't want to. They say, "Oh, you're fracking. You want to stop fracking the territory?" No, I want to shut fracking down globally for the planet, for the future of all human beings on this planet. It's a disgusting, stupid, irreversible industry. It's the craziest thing I've ever heard in my whole life, and it needs to be shut down now, yesterday. And this is what I like to do. I would love to do, and I get up to all sorts of mischief, and I'm always dreaming up ideas and fighting it, because it's irreversible. There's no going back after they, and you know, they say, oh, they talk about fracking. Now, they're attacking the vulnerability, the most vulnerable in our communities, the remote areas. They're out there, they'll be out there busy now, trying to get in there. They start with the exploration license, and they go out and they're looking for this and they're looking for that and they're looking for that and looking for that. Then they'll go in with fracking. Now, I'll guarantee you that my people, over 200 different languages, most of them, English is the first, it's probably third, fourth, fifth, sixth language, doesn't matter. They do not know or understand the enormity of fracking or the disgusting industry that it is. They will not know. I hardly even know myself, but I know enough to know that when you frack, you need 16 billion litres of water to do one drill. Where is that water coming from? Well, it's coming from the sacred groundwater, and then they can drill down 4 kilometres into Mother Earth. 4 kilometres into Mother Earth, a drill going in. And then what? From any point that they decide, they can let off an explosion that's going to go 10 miles radius. Our people don't know this. They don't understand that. They know these fellows are fracking. They know what fracking. They don't know what fracking means. They don't understand. They would be mortified. And so these mob are attacking our people and going in there. They're not explaining the whole deal. Where was I? I could go on forever about lots of stuff. However, I think it's really, really important that we don't take it as a given. You know, a lot of people think, you know, the government's doing their best to look after everybody. They're acting in our best interest. Well, no, they are not. They're acting in their own best interest. They don't give a damn. They're raping and pillaging, and it's thuggery. It's illegal. It's fraudulent, and there's no stopping them, apparently. But we need to find ways to stop them. In the first instance, we must say to everybody, do not take it as a given that they can just do what they like. We must resist. We must honor our ones that have gone before us, our elders, our past peoples. They have, you know, we deserve to uphold and stand up and look after country as we ever do. Don't be fooled by this charade that we're presented with every day, that the dominant culture, which would choose to have us assimilated and all that stuff. We must maintain and communicate together a lot more and fight with each other, join with each other, and those same old things that we've done forever, the same old things, hitting the streets, you know, they still work, and they have to work, and I put more faith in that people power, and hitting the streets, those same old laws are the ones that are gonna go. And now what have we got now? What have we got now? We've got social media. I remember being very, feeling very defeated back in the day when probably in my 30s and 40s, and then the internet came in, and oh my God, I didn't even know how it was going to help me, but I knew it was going to help me. And now we've got the internet. Now we've got social media. I feel so light because I know I can just get on, press a button, and I can tell a story. And that story is going to go far, far, farther than I could ever go in my whole life. And that makes me happy in this day and age, I can tell you so much. And into the future, sorry, I'm nearly out of time, but I love you guys. And watch this space, I guess. I'm always dreaming up ideas how to empower the young ones, show them the way to go, show them that we don't have to put up with this horror story that they would have us subject to, the ones in power, or they think they're in power. We don't take it as a given. No, we challenge them at every turn, and we resist them at every turn, and we put forward our notion at every turn, and we still maintain our responsibilities to care for country and to care for each other. And on that note, I would say my love to all of you. Yours in solidarity, always, Ma. Thank you.
Thank you, Auntie June. That was absolutely lovely. It's so wonderful to hear your passion and your commitment and the responsibility that you carry with your name and your responsibility to country, and that also extends globally. I think the power of people, as you say, that collective power of people to working together can make the change down in the future. So thank you so much for your time. We'd love you to stay till the end if possible, in case there's any questions that people might be able to ask you. Thank you so much. Our second speaker today is Karina Lester. Karina is a Yankuni Chachara Anganu woman from the Anganu Pinchichara and Yankuni Kachara lands in the far northwest of South Australia. Karina grew up in the remote community of Memeli in the beautiful Everard Ranges with her father's people, and is very determined to keep her language alive and ongoing for the future generations. Karina currently works for the Mobile Language Team as Aboriginal Co-Manager and Senior Aboriginal Language Worker at the University of Adelaide, supporting the Aboriginal languages of South Australia in revival, maintenance and reclamation programs. Thank you for joining us here today, Karina, and over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nita, and good evening or afternoon, everybody. Your afternoon in the West there, Nita, so time difference. But thank you again for the opportunity. It's a bit of a tough act to follow after Auntie June and her wise words. But my insight and my stories that I'd like to share are stories around our Aboriginal languages, of course, and Auntie June did speak about that as well. But then also talk of some of the activism work that I do in South Australia and the current issues of the national radioactive waste dump that's on our doorstep and being debated at the moment. So I just wanted to just let everybody know that I'll sort of touch on those two topic areas as well. So before I do get into my conversation, I do want to acknowledge that I am in Adelaide and on Kaurna country, but as Nita mentioned, that I am from the Arnangal and Pitjantjatjara Yankunytjatjara lands, which is in the far northwest of the state of South Australia. And so I'm well and truly out of my area, but I've been living down here for some time. But I often go back home onto country, which is really important to me and important to my children and for myself and my own health and well-being as well, to be able to travel back to country, which I only did so on Tuesday. So it's been a little bit of a adjustment in coming back to the city into Adelaide, and after spending some good quality time back home on country, which has been really lovely. I often say that my tail end learning of my oral language was a huge, I guess, a huge responsibility that I later in life realised that it's a gift that I have, that I can speak my native language. So I'm a fluent Yankunytjatjara speaker and a first language speaker. My late father, Yami Lester, was heavily involved in many things over the many decades as I grew up, and he certainly worked as a Arnongo interpreter and translator. And Auntie June mentioned that it's really important for our mob to know and understand these technical terms. And I believe my late father was really strong in making sure that Arnongo understood what was being discussed and debated, and that the knowledge of interpreters are really important in getting our mob to understand the decisions and the processes and the procedures and the techniques, and all of that information needs to be done in their first language, in whether it's Bijanjara Yankunytjatjara or whether it's in their language in the centre of Australia or right up at the top end country as well. There are so many Aboriginal languages, and you know, that's this week I've been focusing on that. Always was, always will be, the diversity of our Aboriginal languages, not only across South Australia, but also across our beautiful nation as well. And we should be celebrating, and that's certainly something many of us have and continue to do, in celebrating our Aboriginal languages and how diverse they really are, and how important they are to our own identity as well, making sure that that's all passed on from generations to generations and to our grannies and beyond as well. And so the amazing work that I have the privilege of doing at the University of Adelaide is to work with the South Australian Aboriginal people, and to, you know, hear from the community their, I guess, their dreams and aspirations, and what their passions are for their language and what they want to see for their Aboriginal languages. We're all diverse within our state, and we know that, you know, right across our nation we're very diverse, and many go through a revival. Kaurna country and Kaurna language have been going through, goodness me, it would be nearly 40 years of revival, and that's been working with linguists and working with old missionary documents that are hidden away in museums and in libraries, and, you know, spending many decades of bringing and restructuring that language. And it's an amazing journey, and credit to all the Kaurna people. And I'm very privileged to be working with a lot of them across in Adelaide as well, and in this state. And then you go up to the mid-north area of the state of South Australia, and, you know, there's a real urgency to work with them, because you may only have a number of speakers of that particular language. So a handful of speakers, there's that real urgency to sit down and gather all that knowledge and information that they have of their language, their culture, their stories of their country. And just recently, at the end of October, there was a beautiful launch of Adnyamatna Dictionary by Terence Coulthard, which was a huge achievement for the Coulthard family up there in Igawada, and their language, the Adnyamatna language, in the beautiful part of the Flinders Ranges in South Australia. And so that is such an important asset to that community. And we've been heavily involved in working closely with Terence and his family and that community in developing a wonderful resource for them. And then you go up to the north part of South Australia, and you have strong languages such as Bijanjara Yankunytjatjara languages, but they are still all at risk as well because of the social structural changes that are happening. And contact, of course. Many of this next generation are living in communities and go from community to community, travelling through country, and not as much travelling out onto country. And so a lot of that information of their surrounding areas is not being passed on, because many of them are living in these communities. And so changes, and huge social changes, are happening within those remote communities as well. But we work on, you know, making sure that we can maintain our Aboriginal languages, and we're just starting to embark on a journey of moving towards bilingual education, which is in those two languages, in Bijanjara and Yankunytjatjara languages. And so we're working really closely with our people and also in particular with the Department of Education here in South Australia to embark on that journey of moving towards a bilingual program and a bilingual model that will be there on country, delivered by our people and our people in the classrooms, teaching our mob about those important issues to them, and about culture and about language as well, which is really important. But really important for Anangu and Aboriginal people from those areas on the APY lands to be there from the very beginning of those discussions, to feel that they are valued. And we often talk amongst ourselves, amongst ourselves, that there's a little bit of a devaluing at times by the Department of Education, and also a devaluing of government in general. They've, in my area, in that tri-state, in the bottom end of the Northern Territory, WA, and in the northwest of South Australia, there are 250 plus service providers out there providing a service, but taking away many opportunities for our own mob. And that at times is quite frustrating for people, and for my family up there in the far north, who are looking for these opportunities of employment to work on country, whether it's land management, whether it's working on education and being teachers in the classroom, whether it's working in the office in their community store, or working at the general store. A lot of those service providers are taking those opportunities where we could, as Arnonga people, could take on those roles and those responsibilities as well. So I often think that they're coming in and saving us, but in actual fact they're taking away these opportunities of us being in ownership of our destiny and our decision making. And again, that need to really give that confidence back into our own mob, to be the ones to stand up and say, actually, I will sit around and make these decisions for my people around many topics, many issues. Language is one of them, but good choices on programs, and good programs that should be out there in those remote communities as well. Part of my other bit of work that I have been doing, and some of you may know the story of my late father, Yami Lester, but he was exposed to the British nuclear testings that happened in 1953 in particular, because of the Emu Fields tests. Two bombs were released at a location called Emu Fields in South Australia. He was a young fellow at the time, probably around 9-10, and he, on his traditional lands, was exposed to radiation fallout along with his own family that were living there. And I guess because through parts of the negotiations, he was able to secure those traditional lands, and we often go back home. So it is home, and we see those old remnants of old shelters where they were at that time, when Dad recalls the ground shaking and the black mist rolling. And for those, for the youngest daughter growing up and knowing that story, it has really, I guess, continued on the legacy of not only Dad's story, but also my beautiful grandmothers, who were heavily involved in a previous campaign at the end of 1998 to 2004 on what was known as the Irariwandi campaign. And that was, again, a national waste dump issue somewhere around, when it was at a place called Akuna Station in the mid-north of South Australia. And my amazing grandmothers were heavily involved, and many of us, and it certainly was a united fight, getting involved in making sure that we could certainly get our voices out there to the wider world and wider community, to block that waste dump. And I certainly came on board at that time with Nana, knowing Dad's story as well, but also being able to, I guess, take on those stories and talk up and remind everybody of what happened in our own backyard in South Australia with British nuclear tests. 1953 was Emu Fields, and because of the remoteness of that location, they moved down to Maralinga-Jarrudja. So in the 50s and 60s, a whole decade, they tested on our traditional lands, which is the northwest from Adelaide area here. So we're always reminded, and I guess I was always reminded because Dad's eyesight was taken away from him, and we lived with that. It's been 3 years now since Dad's passing, and it's been, I guess, a important journey in my own life to continue on Dad's legacy and to really continue on getting the stories out, but also building those relationships and standing strong together. And so in South Australia in 2015, 2016, there was a royal commission into the nuclear fuel cycle. And that was a huge sort of curveball that came to our community. Again, a Labor government decided to run a royal commission into looking into the fuel cycle. We later found out that through the whole process, they were really looking at the waste and hoping to cash in on the waste. And again, it was really important that Arnongo and Aboriginal voices were front and centre from the very, very beginning of that. But that took us 2 years almost to really voice our concerns and our issues and to get this, these concerns and our stories across to a panel or a group of jurors, which was around 300 jury participants from, handpicked in our state of South Australia to be the jury on this issue about the nuclear fuel cycle. So that really took a lot of time and energy out of our sort of normal lives. But we were successful, and that was a big part of that success was because we built those united relationships with many of other groups across the nation as well, and because there was the history there with the Irariwandi campaign and then the movement up there, up at Makari, where they went up to the Northern Territory, and now the national waste dumpers come back down into South Australia and are now looking at the Kimber region, which is on Bangala land. And so again, in solidarity, Yankunytjatjara people and Binyanyara Yankunytjatjara people, Western Desert Mob are standing in solidarity with the Bangala mob as well. Only just this week, or just in NAIDOC week, we've been, believe it or not, but actually supported by One Nation to block the passing of this legislation, which was the National Radioactive Waste Dump legislation, that they were trying to make changes to identify that Kimber was going to be the location for the national waste, and also that they were going to take away the judicial review so Bangala could not take it to court. That concerned us as Western Desert Mob, as Binyanyara Yankunytjatjara people, and so we were really strong in voicing and obviously building those allied and I guess starting that lobbying work of ringing and making calls and expressing our concerns and our issues and pushing with our parties and crossbenchers as well. So I didn't get the support, and that was fantastic that we were able to block those changes in that legislation with everybody on board and everybody involved in getting those stories across. So that's where we're at now, but again, it's not an end yet. I think it's these things never go away. This has been a generational story for my family and my people since those British nuclear tests, and it's 2020 and we're still talking up strong, but we need to do that. And as Auntie June mentioned, we need to all stand together in solidarity, and we need to really get our stories out there and our issues and our concerns. So thank you very much, Amnesty, for the opportunity to chat on this session this afternoon, and I really look forward to the hearing from the other speakers as well. I think I've gone well and truly over my time, Nita.
Not at all, Karina. That's fine. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us today. I particularly can see the value in what you're saying about really protecting those languages and those stories from, they're not even the past, they've only just happened. It's our very recent history, and I really value the work, and thank you so much for all that you do to make sure those stories are saved and protected and continue to be told. So thank you very much. Our next speaker today is Auntie Steph Armstrong. Stephanie Armstrong is a proud Gamilaraya woman who has strong links with Victoria through family and friends. Her 35 years of experience in education has provided her with the satisfaction of talking and listening to many children and their families. Auntie Steph has been working part-time as the Wendthunga Health Network's health and education consultant. She initiated a number of projects related to connecting with and supporting First Australian senior secondary school girls and was responsible for introducing them to a number of health careers. She has spent a lot of time building relationships with key community members, families, local teachers, and tertiary educators in a bid to ensure that First Nations senior schoolgirls have a bright future. She's presented at national and international conferences about her experiences as a first Australian working in the Australian education system. Her co-authored chapter in the text, Two-Way Teaching and Learning Towards Culturally Reflective and Relevant Education, outlines how she believes that strong relationships with First Australians and Australian people are vital to improving educational and health outcomes. Auntie Steph has also received the Emerging Indigenous Leader Award for 2013 and 14 and is featured in the documentary When the River Runs Dry. Welcome, Stephanie. Thank you very much, and over to you now.
Thanks so much. Karina, it was hard to go after Auntie June, and it's even harder to go after you. So I too would like to acknowledge and pay respects to the country that that we're all meeting on this afternoon across all across the nation, and to the peoples, and in particular for me to think about the water and the trees that you know, at this time in spring there is so much more sort of brightness in our lives, but also a bit like NAIDOC, it's been some joys, but with the fight for trees here in Victoria in particular, some of those special trees that have guided our people for so long and that are seen as sacred, just like our waters, it's been difficult as well. I suppose for me, it's my situation as a teacher and being part of a system for so long, and then being able to get out of that system and work and support young women is probably my, you know, the work that I've done over the last 15 years in particular. But the other part is very much about water. So the two bits that I'd like to sort of talk about is where I was born in Collarinda in New South Wales on the Barwon, and what's occurred with the water, but also that you know, the strength of our young people, and you know, the incarceration of children, and really also in the film In My Blood It Runs, it shows you I suppose what our children are up against within that system. So they're probably the two main things. Like many of us, I talk in circles, so I hope you can just keep with me as I go, because I have had you know, a time as an educator for 40 years in this space, and so probably unlike the other two, I'm a very small fish in this big pool. But yeah, it's about, I think for me, it's about everyone doing their little bit. So when I hear Auntie June about that responsibility, I take my responsibility seriously, you know. And as time's gone on and I have been placed in that position of aunt with some of our community down here, I you know, continue to step up and take that aunt role in that space. So I work with a group called Wendthunga, and we support, in particular, the focus is on Aboriginal girls from year 10, 11 and 12, and then support them into university or TAFE, and then into the workforce. And that's been sort of something we've done over the last 8 years here in Victoria. And it's really been about the reason we focus on Aboriginal girls, because straight away people want you to think about the boys, and you know, there's always lots of people doing that space. But a few years ago, in another role I reviewed programs across Australia, and what we found, you know, through Clontarf, girls' academies, role models, I was sort of out talking to the leaders of those sort of programs, and twice as much money went into boys' programs, and there were twice as many programs for boys. And so I just thought, what can I focus on? And as a woman starting to get to that, where the hair starts turning grey, I thought that's where I need to focus all my attention on, for young Aboriginal women, and for their, you know, to be an advocate for them and to bring their, you know, voice to the table. So that's what I've sort of done for most of, you know, for the last, like I said, 10 to 15 years. But the other part that I've been part of is the fight for our river in the dark. And, you know, it's been widely, I suppose, spoken about. The film When the River Runs Dry that Rory McLeod has done and was shown in 2019, people have seen it, really shows, I suppose, the devastation of our rivers, you know, and the trouble that has been caused by people not really listening to Aboriginal voice, not listening to country, believing that there's only one way to do something, using power and privilege to minimise voice, to ignore country altogether in some ways, I think, you know, because when you see animals dying, rivers with no water in them and it's not running, then surely people can see what's happening, you know. I'm not a scientist or anything like that, and you know, Dr. Anne Polina from the Kimberley speaks beautifully about the idea about proceeding with caution and what's happening in the Kimberley and how their voices have to be heard, and that they should learn from what happened, you know, has happened to our rivers in the past. For Aboriginal people, we are always looking to the past to inform our actions, you know, and that's the biggest difference, I think, from us. We're always listening to those voices that have gone previously, you know, that have held strength and power and wisdom. And Karina, I remember your dad, you know, I started out as a teacher in 1980, 81, 82. You know, there were so many strong voices around in that times, and there was bilingual education. I went up to the Walbury lands and seen these amazing Aboriginal teachers who were able to go from language to English, you know, within a matter of, you know, just changing within the classroom. It was so beautiful to see. And that strength of Aboriginal people to be able to use language, to be able to connect to country, is something that I think for this year is, with NAIDOC, is to really reflect on deeply. I've always reflected. In the middle of the night, I used to be thinking about a child or a family I would work with, and I'd get up in the middle of the night and start writing notes. In the end, my husband built me a little room in the attic so I could not wake him up, because I'd get these thoughts at 2 a.m. and needed to get them down. So I've always been someone who's reflected on what they've done and then have taken those actions, you know. Like Nita said, I've worked across Australia, worked in classrooms, outside of classrooms. And so I've been just so blessed to have listened to so many people. So I started in Ceduna in South Australia. That time, Pitjantjatjara people would come, and they were, you know, around the outskirts of Ceduna with Kukatha Wurrugu children that were there. And then I was lucky enough to take my 2 children out of school when they were 5 and 7. And for 4 years, I taught my children on country myself. They both finished university. They are both beautiful women. They're in their 30s now. And I just really think that education needs to be so much bigger. They are grounded, I believe, in you know, in that Gamilaroi ways of seeing the world and valuing the world. And that idea of valuing country and valuing the people with kindness, and be grateful for the way that we live, you know. Language has been important, though I haven't got the Gamilaroi language. My mother was a language teacher, and she's quoted in New South Wales saying language is our soul, because it is that, you know, that deep depth within us. With language just brightens the world in my eyes. You know, you can't explain a country or what occurs or the concepts around it without using that language of that country. So I thank you for that, Karina, and Auntie June, for your, you know, for your for your constant work in that space, which really needs to be continued, I think. I was saying to the small group before that I had the privilege of going back to Broome last year and walking back into a classroom after being out of it for many years. I thought, I can't say to young people to have the courage and speak up if I just sat in my very comfortable position as someone who'd worked and I'd, you know, had all those things that people see as success, a house, a car, all those sorts of things. But I still didn't feel whole. I still feel like working with our young people is so important. So I pulled up in my socks and went back into the classroom to teach year 10, 11 and 12, young Aboriginal children in particular, or young Aboriginal men and women. It was very scary, but if anyone's been a teacher or knows of an educator, you're also an actor in some way. So Auntie June, I might go into comedy or something as well because I had to put on that brave face going back into a classroom after being out for many years. And I was only there for 9 months. Sadly, I had to come home, but the joy of working with young people, and I just wanted to let you know that these young people, that men and women who have, you know, 3 and 4 or 5 languages and standard English, trying to cope within a system that really tries to crush their spirit. We really need to look to be able to support their voice and the way that they are thinking and doing things. It just amazed me every day. I'd be up and at work at 6 o'clock and I would be, you know, come home tired, but every day you would want to go back into the classroom because they are in the biggest fight they can be in. And I think as a community, both Aboriginal people and our allies really need to back these children. When I look at that, you know, watch the film In My Blood It Runs, it just reminded me of so much of how we needed to get behind that young boy and his nanas and family. You know, what an amazing young man. And I sat in the classroom with so many of them. A number of them, you could trace their history. Their grandfathers and their grandmothers were fighters of land and country, you know, this resistance in them. And that's what I tried to evoke within them, that they had this strength and that they needed to make sure that they kept strong in who they are, keep their language and resist and keep that strength of who you are. Because I think identity, and as First Nation people, that's what we hold so dear. I was a bit scared to talk when I first started, but I think like most of us, isn't it, once we get around, I'd love to have been around a campfire with you all and have a good yarn, because it's so hard like this and my nerves go a bit funny. And like I said, I continue to talk. But look, I just hope if there's any questions, we can sort of chat a little bit further later. But like I said, the importance of the work that's been done with the rivers in northern New South Wales, I think we need to be looking at what's occurring there. My sister is part of a group of First Nations women who are looking at a water alliance and are working and speaking up as a group of First Nations women in New South Wales. The work that Dr. Anne Polina is doing in the Kimberley, and the work of, if anyone knows Children's Ground, of again supporting and setting up a group of First Nation educators across Australia. So, you know, I think just as, yeah, to really get beyond back First Nation voice, I think would be my main thing of thinking about NAIDOC, yeah, for this year. So thanks for that. Nita, I'm trying to find where you are. Nita, that's me.
Thank you, Auntie Steph. Thank you very much for all your words that you've shared with us today, and especially for, you know, expressing the importance of protecting the waters of this country and of the lands, and for supporting the young people, young men and young women through the education system. Thank you so much for explaining that to us, and also for the work that you do in that space. Very much appreciated. We'll now turn to Uncle Rodney Dillon. Uncle Rodney, if you're there. Rodney is a Palawa elder from Tasmania, the Indigenous Rights Advisor for Amnesty International Australia, member of the Stolen Generations Alliance, Australians for Truth, Justice and Healing, and a former Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commissioner for Tasmania. In 2019, Rodney was involved in the Family Matters campaign, and I particularly like these words of his, which I will just read out briefly. The federal government must invest in the leadership of our children and young people and provide the mechanisms for their voice to be heard and incorporated into policy development and reform processes. They are our future. They need to be part of the change to see a brighter, more reconciled and just Australia. Because of them, we must. Thank you, Uncle Rodney. Over to you.
Thank you, Nita, and thanks for hosting this. I'd also like to thank the three speakers before me, and I feel very proud and privileged to be with your group tonight, and for strong speakers before me, and thanking the Redfern group as well for putting this on. They're important steps, and also like to acknowledge Country and Water and all our people that's come before us, our old people who stood up to the muzzle loaders, the people who have never been recognised. I think all these people today, we see everyone else on the 11th of the 11th commemorating their times, but we never get to hear of our old people who stood up and was brave, and they was the first people to defend this country. Acknowledge those, the voiceless people of this country who have never been recognised. And I think the same can be said for our kids. Our kids that's in this prison system, they're the most voiceless people in Australia. These kids' voices never get heard. When they've got a complaint, their complaints are never heard. And we think of Dondale prison, but I think that there's been bad things going in all the detention centres. Dondale's one of, but other prisons, when the door shuts at 5 o'clock on Friday night and there's no one there to judge what happens, I think all hell can break loose with our kids in these places. And when these kids go into those detention centres, they're scarred for life. They start their apprenticeship, their trade, and their trade is that they'll end up in the big prison. So we're condemning these kids to a life of crime once they go in at 10 years of age. And to see these little kids, these little black eyes looking at you, and when you're walking out, they're burning in the back of your throat. And you're the last person that they see going out there that may be able to help them. And I feel that responsibility heavy sometimes. And I just to acknowledge those kids that's in those places. And we've got a lot of kids, you know, and we see the racism that's in Australia and why we've got so many kids locked up in this prison system. You know, if you go to the Northern Territory, I don't think for a long time now that they've had one kid in there that wasn't Aboriginal. This is a continuing cycle that has gone on for years, and our people have been stuck in that prison system. And I just, it worries me. The kids that's in the police cages, the kids that they throw in the back of a wagon, a flat top ute with no seatbelts, and they travel these kids anything up to 550 k's from Tennant Creek to Alice Springs. Those drivers are driving along flat out. There's bugs hitting those kids. Those kids are not prepared, you know, and kids being driven around towns, small towns, in a police cage. You know, what does that send, the message that send to our people? I think that we've spoke to a lot of families around Australia, and like I said before, every time a kid goes into that prison system, they come out more angry and harder to deal with than when they went in. So these places are no place for our kids. And at Amnesty, we're talking about Indigenous-led solutions. One of the speakers before me talked about, I think it was Karina, I think, you spoke about all these other services that are in place but not being led by our people, no self-determination for our people. We're talking about having Indigenous-led solutions in all communities instead of sending kids thousands of kilometres to a prison system. Get them back to their people on the land, and let them people on their own lands talk about what that means to them and how you can break down the trauma that some of these kids have got, and they can have that relationship with their elders and with their lands from where they come from, and also talk about their responsibilities. So I think there's some of the important parts, and having that building capacity within our organisations to look after our kids in our local areas. I don't think we should underestimate how important that will be, and that will employ people in our own areas to do that. Because at the moment, it's costing between 200 and 300,000 a year to keep a kid in a detention centre, and we know that there are no places. And I think that the work you do, Stephanie, with kids, teaching kids, the education is the way forward for our kids. But unfortunately, we've got a lot of kids that's been expelled from school, and the moment they go on that expulsion career, they go from expulsion from the school to the detention centre to the prison. So there's a direct line we know that goes, and it's the white fella's dreaming story for black fellas. That's what it is. And I just it just horrifies me sometimes to see that, and to see our kids stuck in there. We never had a prison for our kids. Our kids was always in our communities. We didn't have a prison for our kids. So why we got one now, and why we only got Aboriginal kids in it? I think these are all the things we talk about at Amnesty, and we talk about, if we go to that Amnesty website and have a look at community is everything. And community is everything. We talk about always was, always will be, and community. The community is everything, and what that kid needs is a healthy community to live in, and to be able to look after those kids there. So that's a bit about the where our kids are with the expulsion and putting our kids in the detention, and trying to get and if you have a look at what's happening in Burke with that justice reinvestment, I think that's a really good pathway there. But we need justice reinvestment all over Australia, not just in one town. We've got to be able to get the government to support a lot of these issues in a lot of areas. Down to the prison in Perth. That kid's family will never see that kid while they're down in that prison. They never get to go from there down to see him. The kid's lonely. They're there with people that they don't know. It's just a pretty rough place for our kids to be. So the work we're doing of raising the age of criminal responsibility from 10 to 14 it's something that we all do, and we should all be doing, And I listened to you, June and Karina, speak about the issues that's affecting you in your lands. Isn't it a pity we couldn't get a group together that could get all Aboriginal people in Australia and all our groups together to sign petitions, so when something like this happens, that every Aboriginal in Australia signs this petition, and it goes down to that government to deal with. I think that we need to be better organised in that area, and I'm only coming up with a solution. I haven't got the things from the front to the back. I'm probably better at thinking up things rather than putting things in place. So that's why I've probably never done so well in some other areas. But there's some of the things I think of that we should be doing to support what all. I can remember 30 years ago, I was going to court down here for taking a mutton fish, and a fish that was pretty important to me, and they was going to put me in jail for it. And when I was coming out of court each time, there was a lot of cameras there. I felt very lonely, and I think that when people are fighting cases, whether it's the uranium or the fracking, you sometimes can feel lonely, and I think that we should be better supporting each other in this area. And I don't know how we do it, but I feel that we should be doing something. We talk about heritage acts and strengthening the acts, so that the acts are as weak as water at the moment. The act in Tasmania here, it's called a Relics Act. That's how ancient our act is. And people can destroy, whether it's here in Tasmania or in the Kimberleys or in South Australia, the people can destroy our things without any consequences at all. And until we can get these acts that are strong enough, but these, and the moment, we can have, I'm the chair of the Heritage Council here in Tasmania, and we can put it down and say, we don't want this heritage to be, we want to preserve this heritage. But the white minister who's in charge of heritage, he's only got to sign a piece of paper and he can destroy that. they're building a golf course down here on top of a big midden site and a sacred site and a scattered site of probably, I don't know, 20 or 30 hectares. This site was a really important site to us. They're going to dump metres of dirt on that and make a golf course for white privilege to play golf on top of our site. And that's only one. And I know of all you people who's here before me, the same things happen in your areas, and we get very frustrated with it. And there are things that the Act needs to be stronger. I don't know whether we need a National Act for heritage or what it is, but we need an act where Aboriginal people are in charge of it, because while we've got other people in charge of it, they can just sign a paper and our heritage anywhere in Australia can be destroyed. So I think that that's something else that we need to be looking at as well. So they're all the things that that make me tick at the moment, and my hair's getting greyer and my bum's getting wider and I'm getting older every day. So that's just part of what I've been thinking about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Uncle Rodney. It's lovely to hear from you. I can really hear the pain that you're expressing of these sites that are just getting destroyed indiscriminately with a white signature, when they've been for so many thousands and thousands of years sacred sites for the Aboriginal people of those lands. So we all stand with you together, everyone here today, to continue the fight to stop these things from happening. And also what you were saying in particular about how young people starting out in the schools, getting expelled for little bits of trouble that they might be doing at school, and how this really is a pipeline into the prison system. And yeah, we look forward to continuing to work with you to break down that pipeline and stop these children getting funneled into the system. So yeah, thank you very much for your time and for sharing all of that with us today. And thank you to all the speakers again. We have had some comments being added into the chat throughout the evening, so I'll just scroll back to the top there. Thank you to everyone in the audience who has participated by adding comments and questions to the chat as well. That's really great to see people getting involved. Mostly throughout the chat, we're having a lot of thank yous and consideration for what all of you, the individual 4 speakers, have been talking about. So lots of gratitude there and solidarity. So passing that on to you there as well. June, there is a question here for you if you're able to. It comes from Wilson John. He's saying, the only way to stop fracking is by court orders issued by juries. Now, it's not really a question, but I was wondering if you wanted to perhaps speak to that, if you agree, or perhaps have other thoughts on how fracking could be stopped, whether court orders is the only way to go.
Well, I don't believe that. I think I pin most of my hopes on civil disobedience, actually. You know, it does have a part to play, I must say. However, we can't just rest on that, or I'm not saying rest on it, that's not the right word. I think we have to attack it on all levels. Education, getting out there in the field, going to the people, stalling, interfering. Like I said, civil disobedience. I'm thinking of getting, you know, when you go down drive down into remote areas, there's cars everywhere along the road. Get all these cars, pile them in the middle of the road. Let's hinder and harass and really interfere with their operations. Because, I mean, by the time you get something into the courts, they could be already in there and everything's done already. I'm pinning all my hopes on civil disobedience, actually. And maybe even some other stuff, which I will not say online or on phone or on anything. But we have to have confidence, and we have to reclaim and be strong in the knowledge, and we have to keep on doing this. This is our land. This is our land. You are illegally occupying, and we're going to, you know, by hook or by crook, we're going to stop you from your destructive path We are not going to put up with it. The world's children, the next generation, deserves much better than what you people, I'm not saying yous of course, but what these miners and the governments and everyone have planned for the next generation. Well, guess what? My plan is beautiful, and it's not only for my grandchildren, it's for every grandchild on this planet, and it's clean water, and it's a full belly, and it's good education and good experiences and all that. And by hook or by crook, I'm sure every one of us is going to fight till our last breath for that. We will. To our last breath, we will fight for a better future for every child on this planet, because they're going to be our future. And like I say, we all got the grey hairs and the white hairs, and I'm actually knowing that how much time have I got left? 10, 20 years? Not much. The last 20 years went like that. And so I've got a lot of things to do. And if nothing else, express what has to be done and what has to be maintained, the most important things about the quality of life, about our life and our responsibility. And, you know, we've all been taught a lot, as well as to be modest and to be humble, but we've also, one of the shining things in our cultural upbringing is caring for each other, caring and sharing. And it sounds so thing, but that is a very strong thing in our whole existence, caring and sharing. And this capitalistic approach that the world is fixated on is not the way. And we're going to break it down, and we're going to show people a better life and a better way to live and a better way to live sustainably within the planet. And we're going to do it. And I have a lot of fun dreaming up things to do to get messages out in all sorts of ways. One of the most recent things is which I'm working. I'm old. I got sore knees and a sore back and everything, but I want to make up a stupid dance, a really stupid dance with stupid everything that's going to go viral and go to the whole world and get everyone doing this dance and singing this crazy song. But we'll shut down the fracking industry. You know, we have to do these kinds of things, and I'm really relishing using social media and the internet and all that. And sorry, am I going on too much? I'm an angry granny. I'm an angry granny because our future deserves better.
Thank you so much, Auntie June. And you've got a lot of support in this space here. People are writing as you're speaking, saying, yes, you're right, civil disobedience. We love your strength and your honesty. Another comment is that we agree, the children are our hope. And as a mother and a grandmother, we're fighting for our kids. Hear, hear, sovereignty was never ceded. And go the angry grannies. We're looking forward to seeing this dance, and we may have to schedule another Zoom collective at some stage too, or where you can teach us all so we can dance along with you. It sounds like a great idea. Thanks for your response. I'll just scroll back up now and see if there's other questions that have come through. Rodney, there's a question here for you, if you don't mind. It's saying that, dear Rodney, no one can be imprisoned unless by a jury, and no court can proceed summarily without the consent of both parties to be without a jury. Again, it's not a question, but perhaps you may have some response for that. And similarly, another comment is the prison industry is a profitable business model for shareholders, nothing to do with justice and human rights. So perhaps if you don't mind, Rodney, responding to those two comments.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to think that the prison place when kids go in that system, that there's justice, but I don't think there is justice. And if you pick up the Northern Territory, and I'll just use that as an example today, but you could pick up any state, I think, but particularly Northern Territory, when you go in, and every kid in there is Aboriginal, in the one in Alice and the one in Darwin. And I just wonder, isn't there one white kid in Northern Territory that's done something wrong or worse than all those kids that's in that system? Am I so naive? I don't know. I may be, but and I know that there's kids in that prison system up there that shouldn't be there. And I know there's probably some others, and I don't want to put any kids in this prison. We shouldn't have kids in a prison system anyway, but by Jesus, kids go into that system for very, very small things, and they stay in it forever, and that's not fair. What was the other question?
The other question related to the prison industry being a profitable business and not to do with justice and human rights.
Yes, and I think that's why we're trying to say that we want Indigenous-led solutions, so our kids are back with communities, and we pay communities to look after these kids, not prison officers. Prison officers don't normally make good mums and dads, I've found. That's no disrespect to them, but when they're not their kids, they don't know how to look after them. They don't know their culture, and they don't know their language, and they don't know how to look after them. And to sit them in corners and to sit them in isolation, we know how much isolation does damage to our kids. I'm still scared of the dark, and I'm 65. So, imagine how those kids feel in that system. So I think that if we can get things where we can have kids diverted to Aboriginal-led solutions, and I think that's also, it's not only kids going into the prison, but I think we need to start talking about out-of-home care, because a lot of people are making big profits in out-of-home care, and a lot of these kids that's in out-of-home care are not being looked after. So I think that we need to build an industry for Aboriginal people to have our own out-of-home care, and no Aboriginal kid should go into any other place but into an Aboriginal-led or an Indigenous organisation that runs those solutions and those out-of-home care places. I think they're the things we need to be looking at in the future.
Yes, thank you, Uncle Rodney. And in the chat, we've got people agreeing with you as you're speaking as well. So thank you very much for explaining that. And you're right, I think it boils down to any sort of human care or looking after fellow people of this country should never be for profit. It's never going to work that way, and it's never going to have the best interest of the children or adults needing that help. If it's based on profit. So yeah, definitely we're in agreement with you there, and thank you for explaining that. At the moment, there's no further questions in the chat, just lots of words of solidarity and thanks to all of you individually. So I do wish to pass those on to you there. If anyone did want to have a final question, now would be the time to quickly type that one up. Otherwise, we will start finishing up the evening. There's a question just come through, is can we access the Zoom chat later? With regards to the chat column, no, I suggest you do a quick copy and paste before you leave the meeting, if you did want to save all the links and questions and comments that have come through. But the actual Zoom recording will be made available and can be accessed later. Another question's just come through, and perhaps this is for all four of you, whoever may wish to respond. How can people support the issues raised by the speakers? So perhaps Karina or Auntie Steph, we haven't heard from you in this discussion part of the evening. Was there anything you would like to respond to for that question?
Okay. My only comment is to really at least get the conversation happening. The issue that South Australia's faced with is the national radioactive waste dump, and it is a national issue. The feds have been really pushy to say that it's only just a local issue, and many of us now, and many of us Aboriginal groups and First Nations groups are really starting to speak up and say, exactly that it's not an local issue, it's a national issue. This waste will transport through other countries as well, and other states. That's what I'm saying, other states and territories. So, we need to talk with our fellow friends over there, our First Nations mob over there in Sydney, because it will come from Lucas Heights. but we've also needed to build those relationships. So we have a No Dump Alliance website, and I'll share that through to maybe Nita or to Kathy as well. Or if you just Google No Dump Alliance, that has information, but it's a local, civil society, green groups, and, angry grannies as well, if they can come on board. It's just a network of everybody that really is, strong and passionate and concerned about this issue about waste. They're mining it and out of our state of South Australia as well. And the concern that we have is that they're wanting to put this waste. And the solution is to put it temporarily in above ground with, no real protection, but then also that's for a period of time until they work out how they're actually really going to store the waste as well. So we've really stood strong in South Australia to just block no waste at all coming in. And so that's been the issue. It's been a very unfair process, and that's how the feds have been pushing it. So I think just, again, keeping your ear to the ground will certainly get word out to many of our people as well, and to the wider group. And I think taking away from tonight as well is comments that Uncle Rodney spoke about how do we better engage with our own mob. And so, engaging with our mob up there, like with Auntie June and her crew, and speaking with Uncle Rodney mob as well, and then yourself there too, Auntie Steph, just to network better amongst ourselves. I think that's really important. I really wanted to, at one point, to do a national call out, because it is a national issue, to all the First Nations mob. We are really strong on these issues. We want to stand up for our country, and I think that's what we need to do. So if there are other First Nations group listening in tonight, I think word of mouth, get it out there and let people know that this is still an issue within our country about the national waste issue as well.
Thank you, Karina. Thanks for your response. Auntie Steph, were you about to speak there as well?
Yeah, well, a bit like Karina, I think the messages come really about us all connecting and working together. Do you know what I mean? Like I said, now we've got looking at this First Nation educators, because we are, just exhausted with the way that the system has treated our children for so long. And yes, Uncle Rodney, that's trouble. They get kicked out for little or nothing because they, stand up for who they are. At such an early age, and we want to be, nurturing and loving. You can exactly what you were saying with people raising kids who do not love them, they cannot raise them, so it goes back to that old stuff. We know that a community, I love my grandchildren, I love teaching, and I love children, but the system doesn't love them, and that little boy, like I go back to that film, he said, like, people, they are cruel. When I hear that word, it makes me cry, because you think about educators and system being cruel to our kids. Cruelty is something that we should be standing up against, like this is about loving and nurturing those children. And so very much about, shared voices. And I've been, a bit unsure of this social media stuff too, but now I have a Twitter account and Instagram and those sort of things, that I've had the support of my girls. Lovely having adult children to help you through this stuff. But what I've found since COVID is that I've been able to reach out to First Nation women all across Australia, but also women of colour across the world, and other First Nation women in New Zealand and America. And we got on the line to one another and started, and that's what's kept me strong all the way through it. There's been times when I've had a good old cry, and I've cried like this with a group of people as I'm going through things, and it's what's kept me strong this year. So, even though COVID's been hard, it means that we can now still, hopefully through these media, still keep connected together, and stay strong and support one another as we're coming out to get and really, I think it's really given Aboriginal people, we haven't had to have white fellas. Oh, that's what I kept saying to the kids and the people. Now you haven't got white fellas coming and knocking and interfering in your, get strong, and when that door's ready to open, then you can come out with your voice and speak from your heart of what you want. Next year, it was supposed to be this year, but I'm having a walk. I'm doing 120 Ks out from on the Larapinta Trail. It was my gift to myself, but what it is it's called Buggy Malays, so grandmother's friends. So 14 First Nation and Australian women were walking along and yarning and having a couple of young Aboriginal women with us. And then the funds raised will actually provide 20 to 30, maybe more, young Aboriginal women to create a space where they can talk and find the solutions of those things that are important, so that we step back. We can be there as aunties and bring some of our elders in, but that space is for them. So that's what I'm doing, is, yeah, raising funds to be able to set up a retreat and a camp for them to sit down and have a talk, and hopefully that will then give them the strength to continue. So yeah, a bit of a 120k walk over 9 days will keep me busy.
Keep you very fit, Auntie Steph, that Larapinta Trail. I hope it's kind to you. Nita, I've just got one sort of last comment or closing comment before we all wrap up. Just to let everybody know, and people would have heard in media as well, that there has been the 50th ratification of the Banned Nuclear Weapons Treaty as well. This has been huge work done by the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons. But again, no surprise, Australia has not signed on that. So anyone joining in on this presentation, it would be good that you continue to put your pressures on your local government and your local council as well, just to bring it to their attention that you're actually concerned that the Australian government hasn't signed on this. I presented 2018 at the United Nations of Civil Society about the impacts of the whole Pacific region, and that was a strong message. And everybody else around the Pacific region, including New Zealand as well, have signed on this, and Australia hasn't, and it's a bit of a disgrace that they haven't. So any word of mouth and any pressure you guys can do would be very good and supportive for the international campaign to abolish nuclear weapons and to put pressure. I'm hoping now with the new US soon-to-be elect, or, you know, president-elect, Biden, it may be timely for us to have those conversations as a country, but also, you know, for us as a nation ourselves to have those conversations and talk about where do we stand when it comes to nuclear weapons. So I really hope that if you can, certainly network and get that story out and remind people that Australia hasn't signed that Banned Nuclear Weapons Treaty. So check out that website that's just been spun up there by Bernie. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina, and thank you to all the speakers who have been answering these questions. I think we will call it there on the questions for tonight. Once again, there's been messages of support coming through, but no more questions. So do any of the four speakers just have any last comment or any last thing that they wish to put forward to us all?
Yeah.
Yes.
Auntie June?
Auntie June, yes.
Yes, sorry, darling. Just adding on to the fracking business, the government is planning 3 major gas line pipelines across the country. Now, if they're successful in getting those 3 pipelines happening, then that will be the major green light for the fracking to go ahead. And of course, we want to shut down fracking. So there is a link in there, and people can donate or assist in other ways. But that would be the big battlefront now, to make sure we stop them gas pipelines going from Darwin right down to the East Coast, billions and billions and billions of dollars. But we need to stop that. And only one other little thing I'd like to say is, you know, I said civil disobedience. I would up that to not necessarily civil, maybe uncivil disobedience. Pull out all stops. Thank you for having me, and love everybody. Happy NAIDOC, all the above. See you soon.
It's lovely. Thank you very much, June. And Uncle Rodney, yes.
And I just think that one quote is that detention centres are the quicksand of crime. Thank you.
Thank you, Uncle Rodney. Auntie Steph or Karina, did you have any final comment tonight? All done, no worries at all. Well, we'll leave it there then today. And thank you so much to everyone who's been involved, and thank you for the participants for coming along to listen as well. If there's anything that anyone wishes to discuss further about the presentations or any further questions, feel free to get in touch. Throughout the chat, there are email addresses, websites, many links. I won't list them all just now, but you can copy and paste the chat to a document for yourself in case you wish to refer back to that. And as said before as well, this actual event has been recorded and the video will be made available shortly. If you're on social media, please feel free also to join our Facebook page as Amnesty WA's Indigenous Rights Group. You don't need to be in WA to do so. We're happy to have you. And we do have links on there to connect throughout nationally as well to other action groups. So it could be a useful point if you wish to carry on further with this. And we also obviously post up regularly petitions and work that is being done throughout the country. So feel free to join. And you can also email the Red Fern group if you wish to have any further information or to get a copy of this recording as well. Once again, thanks to everyone for joining us. Events like this are only possible with a great audience who are open to listening and learning and are being part of these difficult discussions. And I would like to thank you all genuinely for coming along tonight. Especially thanks to Brimmy, who's been taking care of the technical sides of things tonight, and to Kathy and others who've been looking after the chat and posting links as people have been speaking. So thank you for your work tonight. I'd like to thank all the activists in the National Community is Everything Network, with special acknowledgement to Sabine, who continues to tirelessly work for Indigenous rights and for all human rights. Sabine, we're truly grateful for all the work you do. Thank you. Please join me now to thank our speakers one more time. Thank you, Auntie June, Karina, Auntie Steph, and Uncle Rodney, for all the hard work you do and for sharing with us today. Thank you very much. Many thanks to you all. Goodbye.